Good day to you. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to deal with prescribed conduct rule number 2. This covers waste, rubbish and garbage disposal in sectional title schemes, and in essence is the efficient removal of the waste products generated in schemes. To give you a quick overview, I'll first concentrate on the text of prescribed conduct rule 2, then touch on some issues that vary from scheme to scheme. I will look at the nuisance arising from waste and rubbish and finish off by a summary of both owner and occupier duties and trustee duties. Let's look at the text, and just for your reference, you can find these in Annex 9 to the regulations under the Sectional Titles Act. Obviously, in the club, they're under the Acts tab. Prescribed Conduct Rule 2 is headed refuse disposal. An owner or occupier of a section shall firstly maintain in an hygienic and dry condition a receptacle, a bin, in some cases a wheelie bin, in some cases a smaller bin, for refuse within their section, his exclusive use area, or on such part of the common property as may be authorised by the trustees in writing. So there are three possibilities. The bin might be in the section, it might be in the exclusive use area, or it might be somewhere the trustees have in writing said it must be. That owner or occupier must ensure that before refuse is placed in that receptacle, it is securely wrapped, or in the case of tins or other containers, completely drained. For the purposes of having the refuse collected, the owner or occupier must place that receptacle within the area and at the times designated by the trustees. So where it's kept and where it's placed for collection purposes are probably going to be different. And then when the refuse has been collected, the owner or occupier is obliged promptly to return that receptacle to his section or other place, the exclusive use area or the area of the common property designated by the trustees. Now there are some issues that vary, variable issues. Usually a local municipality arranges for a single pickup point, but in very large schemes there may be multiple pickup points. This obviously requires a municipality agreement with the body corporate. The design of schemes will, of necessity, affect the way the rubbish is collected and moves around through it. In high-rise flats, clearly it's going to be very different. Methodologies required to get that garbage to a central point than it would be in a big scheme with standalone houses. In some cases, with bigger schemes particularly, there's going to be some staff involvement in this process because it just won't be practical for each owner to undertake this. And if you left the prescribed rule as it is, then probably owners wouldn't do what they're supposed to do. So of necessity, in some cases, you've got to get staff involved. And with very big schemes, you may even have to play with the timing of collections, have different areas within the scheme move their rubbish or have their rubbish moved on different days of the week. Mixed-use schemes and non-residential schemes are worthy of a quick mention because they do generate unusual and sometimes large amounts of rubbish, and some of that rubbish can be toxic, it can be dangerous, and therefore needs to be dealt with very carefully. That, to my way of thinking, requires an entirely a separate rule, or should I say a much extended conduct rule, and I suggest then that would be fine-tuned for that particular scheme and for the types of tenants that it's likely to attract. But even in residential schemes, there are types of rubbish that do need to be watched out for. Of course, when we think of rubbish, we think of household rubbish, kitchen rubbish, most of the time. But the garages in schemes can sometimes generate rubbish that can have its own dangers. For example, sawdust in a scheme where a handyman has a workbench. If a little bit of it is fine, but if there's too much of it, what you're then going to find is a fire hazard. Used motor oil falls into the same category. Old newspapers, maybe collected, for recycling, for example. In all these cases, these are things which can, which classify as rubbish, but which can cause other problems. And in some cases, you'll even find that the body corporate's insurance policy is vitiated because these things are kept. So you've got to watch out for that. If a scheme decides to implement a recycling program, that of course requires much more effort from the people using the system. That requires a separation of various types of rubbish. It requires relationships with people who do the work of recycling and take it away. So that requires, again, I think, a specialized rule. There can be nuisance arising from rubbish, and it's a little bit like health. If your rubbish removal process is working well, then you shouldn't notice anything. But the second it doesn't work well, problems can arise. And the problems are normally in the form of vermin such as rats or insects such as cockroaches. I understand that in Johannesburg they're known as Parktown prawns. But they feed on and breed in accumulated kitchen rubbish, and the problem can be found within sections or perhaps at the communal rubbish collection area on the common property. Vermin and insects can carry disease, often do, and are therefore very undesirable. From one area they can breed and spread to another, more widely in the scheme, even from one section to another. And property values can be threatened if any part of the scheme is plagued by vermin or insects. So the trustees have to get involved. Now, when the trustees do feel they need to get involved, how do they do that? Well, if you have a look at the conduct rules, there's nothing absolutely specific that deals with this. They do, in Conduct Rule 11, deal with pests, but those are different types of pests, borer beetle and that sort of thing. In the Management Rule, there's nothing absolutely specifically on point. I expected to be able to twist one of the Prescribed Management Rule 68 subsections rules to fit, but none of them directly relate to the issue of hygiene or the control of waste products within a section. But looking at the Act, I think Section 44 is the one, and 1C imposes an obligation on owners to keep their exclusive use areas neat and clean. And then in 1E, it provides that no owner may use a section or an exclusive use area in such a way that it causes a nuisance. And I think that this is as good as we're going to get. An accumulation of rubbish in a section is a nuisance, and this would be the section one would quote in going for an owner where there was a problem of this sort. So let's have a final summary. Owners must maintain a dry and hygienic rubbish bin. They must, preferably shouldn't be high. They must ensure that the rubbish in it is drained and securely wrapped. They must place and collect the bin as instructed by the trustees, and they must retrieve it after the rubbish has been removed. The trustees can and must specify in writing an appropriate place or places on the common property where the receptacle, the bins, can be kept, and if necessary, a suitable place to which they must then be moved for the collection of the refuse. They must designate the days and the times on which the rubbish will be brought or collected, and the times that the bins will be brought and retrieved, so as to be taken back to where they're normally stored. They must take action when there's a problem with waste disposal. The decision of the trustees as to when and where bins must be kept, when they must be moved, should all be in terms of a minute of a trustee meeting. And insofar as the place where the bins are to be kept, either for storage purposes or for collection purposes, is not absolutely self-describing, then a plan should be attached. So it makes it absolutely clear. Nobody can say I didn't know what I was supposed to do or where this bin was supposed to be. And the decision should be made available to all owners and occupiers. As people move into the scheme, they should be told about this. Otherwise, there will be a disappointment when they don't comply. Thank you very much for watching this Paddocks Club tutorial, and I hope to hear from you in the discussion forum.